Next part of baking, and in this part, as I mentioned before, we're gonna go for a little bit more difficult stuff. As you see, I just hid the two parts that well, 5 parts actually, that we've done before, the wheels and the body, and we're gonna focus on the chassis and some details now. What I'm first doing here is I'm selecting some parts and fixing them up a little bit. Trying to delete double faces and that sort of stuff. I just well, these meshes I'm selecting here were created from splines, and I have to remove the capped sides on them. There we go. Those are removed also. I just don't need them in my bakes, and they could cause some trouble, so that's why I'm removing them. So there we go. I'm detaching this stuff because instead of keeping it as one object, I prefer to go over these and bake them one at a time. And unhiding the high poly stuff. There we go. There's my high poly frame, which I'll be working with. Okay. And what I'm doing here is detaching the parts that are attached to the frame as one object, because I prefer not to bake parts that are intersecting meshes that are part of one object. Well, because obviously when baking and you have intersecting objects, your ray casting, because of your mesh, is going to cause problems. So that's the reason that I detach these, and we'll be baking them separately. So now I'm just looking at all my high poly parts, seeing which ones I can improve and detach some stuff on. Simple preparing work. And I'm also renaming them to make it easy to find them, because I didn't keep up all my renaming until the end, so it's just better to do that so that you don't get any problems while baking. Okay, so I'm checking out the unwraps now, seeing if everything is correct here. And one thing I have to do, and I always do this just for safety, is when I have mirrored UVs, that means UVs that are overlapped on top of each other, I use the Unwrap Tools plugin, which I've talked about in the previous unwrapping video, to offset the overlapping faces 1 unit to the right. So that means they'll be using the texture as well. They'll be using the same texture. They're just going by the tiling effect, sitting outside of the 0 to 1 UV range. This just minimizes problems with baking. I mean, it could get a little bit, could give some problems, and I'm just doing it to be safe. Okay, so first of many, I'm going to start baking the frame, the part to which everything of the car is attached. I think it's only fitting to start with that. And I'm starting with a 2048 texture. And that is looking almost perfect. I just have one small red area there. Let's see what that gives in the... there we go. I had a file open there. Alright, just a small problem. This doesn't even look like it's worth rebaking. And I clicked the wrong max there. I'm just gonna let that one run. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use clone stamp to fix a little bit of this intersecting part. See, that's what happens when you have intersecting meshes. I could do all of these separately, but I'm just gonna clone this away. It's just easier to do it like that. Also, I'm gonna mention it straight away. Another way of working around these these intersecting meshes is to explode your mesh and to offset all separate parts in different directions and then try and bake everything in one part. But I don't really prefer to do it that way, because then you end up with an insanely huge texture with lots of separate baked parts on it. And if you have problems, it's hard to envision where you have to start. I prefer to go over them one by one. Well, not one by one. Usually I group a few together, go over them a few at a time, try and optimize and fix them as good as possible, and then just overlay them on top of each other all the time. So I made a little fix there. And I'm saving this one as miscellaneous normals. There we go. And so what I'm going to do is duplicate that layer piece, duplicate it to miscellaneous normals, and now we have a little separate layer on top here that sort of fixes these problems. It's not perfect yet, but it'll do. So I'm saving this as a PSD because I'm going to start stacking layer after layer on top of this. You'll see when I get there. I'll do some more explaining then. Okay, so next up I'm going to do the grille. Just checking this looks okay. Now I have to offset the parts. See, I type in 1 unit, switch the mode to vertices, and then hit the move right button. It doesn't matter if you go left, right, or up. It just offset it by 1 unit. That's the important thing. And you can't do that without the UV tools. It's one of the best options in there also. Okay, so I'm gonna try and fix the cage now. It looks okay. Hopefully I don't have to tweak it too much. And we have a few mist rays. Let's see where those are. So if you're new to this baking, red mist rays, bad. You want to have no red at all. It's the places where the cage intersects the high poly mesh. And I have a problem here too. Just manually offsetting this. Now there's a small problem at the front. Must be somewhere over here. Move these forward. There we go. Hit render again. Almost there. See, and this is one of those cases where it looks fine with the shaded mesh, but if you bake, it still ends up with mist rays. So you just gotta tweak a little bit manually. Okay, this looks good. So pay attention to what I'm doing. I control click the alpha, then I hit Control J to duplicate that layer, and then I use layer, duplicate layer, and duplicate it to another document. And that's how I stack all these separate baked normal map textures on top of each other. I use the alpha channel to duplicate that specific baked part, and then I use the Photoshop method to get it into another file on the exact same location. And I go over them all the time like this. So next up is this blade at the front, 2048. Also, another reason why it's preferable to work with separate bakes is if you're baking 2 million polygons at once to a 2048 texture, that takes a long time to render. Could take, I don't know, on my computer it would probably be 1 or 2 minutes, which is long because, as you can see, the separate parts only take a few seconds. And I never like having to wait in my workflow. I think it sucks that I have to sit around for a few minutes and do nothing. I just prefer to avoid, and with this method of doing everything separately, I stay busy all the time. I don't have to wait around all the time, so that I don't get distracted and start doing stupid things like playing video games or checking forums all the time. So this looks okay. And I'm checking out the smoothing groups because they were attached together there, as you can see. Notice the change, though, that top corner there. There was a separate smoothing group, but there was no UV split there, and then you get these strange hard edges in there. I just fixed those, so I'm duplicating that layer to the main PSD as well, and that should be about it. Alright, for this part I'm probably going to have to detach some stuff. Also, the reason to name your low poly parts clearly is because 3D Studio Max is going to name your baked normal map textures using the object name. So if you name them Box 33, you're going to have a hard time figuring out what is what. So calling it LP Spring for the leaf springs at the front makes it a little bit more obvious for me what texture I'm working with. Some small mist rays over there, as you can see, a little bit of a problem. And there we go, high push value fixed it. You don't always have to do it manually. Sometimes a push value can work if you're working with an object that isn't too complex. There we go, duplicated that into the PSD file. And this method I've been following for these 3 to 4 parts so far. I'm going to be following this almost all the way to the end. And yeah, it tends to get a little bit boring. So for that reason, I've also cut a little bit into this video. I'm not going to show you everything. I'm going to try to show you a little bit more than with the previous video, as some users would have preferred to have seen everything. But I'm trying to pick the most interesting parts. So showing you this method here, and also, well, I'll get to that after we've done this one. I'll talk about what I want to say. So I have to push this one outwards. And one of the things to pay attention to when you're doing cylindrical objects is, and let's see, it's rotate a little bit. That's a bit annoying. And these I'm doing manually because the high poly shape there is a little bit more complex, well, a lot more complex than the actual low poly shape is. Moving that one slightly upwards. So you see that little sphere at the back of the high poly light, which represents the light bulb inside the headlights. I'm just baking that to the normal map. Nobody's ever going to notice that it's not really there. And there's still a few small intersection issues. There you can see it. It still has trouble with those areas. I'm going to have to select those, and I'm just using a smarter way of selecting. Click the middle one, grow it, and then deselect all the ones in the middle. I'm going to have to move that a little bit. There we go, that's better. So duplicating. And what I wanted to say is, I've talked to people baking normal maps, and sometimes I'm really surprised to hear that they have the idea that your normal map is a texture you bake and you don't even touch it anymore in Photoshop. I mean, why would you even have a PSD version of your normal map? A TGA is perfectly fine. That's not really going to work. For the best results with a normal map, you really need to have a PSD file with separate layers, and just work on your normal map just like you would with a specular or diffuse texture. It sure does require some work. It's not bake and finished. As you can see, I used the clone stamp on the wheels. That was a perfect example also. And for this really complex object, which will be the engine, the frame, and all the details, you're going to have a very big PSD file with lots of layers and lots of tweaks added to it. So I'm testing out the normal map here, and here I have a little problem. The center looks fine. Most of this stuff looks okay, although I'm not too fond of that spring at the front. But this is looking pretty good. Yeah, I'm happy. Some problems here. So see, I waited a while with testing my normal map, which, as you can see now, is showing me some errors that maybe I should have seen earlier. So here's a tip: test your normal map every time you've added or baked it, because some things you just won't see in 2D. Yeah, and you see the separation lines in the leaf spring there. They're not really convincing, even though I modeled them high poly and they were all nice and detailed. So what I'm doing now is rebaking these parts, well, rebaking that part with a better super sampler. So I'm going back to this layer. I'm picking the LP spring normals. Yeah, and you can drop those on the wrong. There we go. Duplicate to the correct file, and saving it again as a TGA. I never preview a PSD. I never do that. And it looks better, but it's still not perfect. So I'll get to fixing that. I think the problem is here that it seems like the middle bar in the leaf springs is coming outwards, while there's supposed to be an indent in between the two bars. And I obviously have some problems on this mesh here. Freaky smoothing errors, which we will get to fixing also. So I'm trying to figure out it. My first thought is here, I'm trying to push too much into a single smoothing group without splitting up the UVs. I've changed it. Yeah, those are obviously not updating because they're not instances. Another instance, and copying the value over there. But this still doesn't look fixed, so I'm going to try and rebake this. So you're already starting to notice that when making lots of separate parts, complex things, I mean, pretty much every single one of the objects I've baked so far has required me to put at least a few minutes of fixing, worth of attention of fixing into it. That if I would do this for one entire bake with everything on one texture sheet, I'd probably be busy for hours and hours, and I'd get bored quickly. It's a personal thing. I prefer to do it this way. So I'm splitting up these smoothing groups here. I've split up the smoothing groups, so I'm splitting up the UVs also. And rendering that again. Opening these again, duplicating them to okay, saving them again as TGA, and I want to see what the changes are because of my new baking. And yeah, it's looking better. It's looking better, but to be honest, it's still not perfect. One side seems okay, but the other side seems to have problems now. This is a strange issue. I'm thinking right now what this could be. Sometimes in cases like this, it might be better to just leave the tricky part for a while and just go do something else. It seems to be fine at the back, but it gets more and more problems at the front. I'm seeing if editing the triangulation is working, but that's also not doing all that much. Okay, I'm just going to leave that part for a while and we'll get back to it later on in this video. We'll get it fixed. So obviously that part is not instant, so it's using the wrong texture. We also have a problem here. Strange enough, it has some sort of weird split there, and I'm probably thinking I'm going to have to change the smoothing group there. I've split the edge. There we go. That's a little bit better also. I'm probably going to have to rebake that because I have some very small missed rays on the object. And that should be a little bit better. Using a high push value. Rendering this again. Let's hope this one works better. Yeah, that's eliminated the missed rays around the center part. Same old trick to get it into my miscellaneous normals file. That one really saves a lot of time if you use this method when stacking normals on top of each other. So I have a small error there because I split the edge, and also I have some missed rays for the sphere in the center. It's probably going to need another go at baking. There we go, so I don't miss those rays. And as you can see, it split open the verts, and that's not what I want. I'm going to weld those back together, and what I'll try to do is use smoothing groups instead, because the problem is I actually split the vertices there, and that means that the cage will also split apart, and I don't want that, so I'm going to use smoothing groups, which is more of a non-destructive method of doing this. So I'm checking out my unwraps and it seems to check out. I'm gonna have to do the projection again, since I obviously forgot that here. Push the cage outward, and I can't forget that middle vert there. That's better. And because it's a cylindrical mesh, it's always better to keep the cap vertices of the cage very close to the low poly, just close enough so they don't intersect your high poly, and it avoids this sort of rippling effect around the edges because of the way rays are cast. You'll notice if you bake a cylinder and the cap of the cage is too far off from the cap of the low poly, you'll get this sort of ripple effect around the edges. If you keep them close, you avoid that. So I'm detaching this slightly because that is going to look better in my smoothing groups. And I'm rendering it, and hopefully it should be fine this time, because this one's a really tough one. It seems like my unwrap that I did here wasn't really optimal. I don't have that much experience doing this kind of shape, so turns out it's trickier than I anticipated. Although it doesn't really make sense that it's giving me so much trouble. I've spent, I think, at least 15 minutes trying to do this one damn part. And it seems okay. There's a little error there at the center. I might just leave that one since it's at the center and you won't really notice that much. The rest looks fine. All right. I'll probably leave that one for now. Okay, so getting to the next part of the video. What I'm doing here is, there was just a little fade there because it was in another part of the video. I'm going to try and fix those spikes at the front. Just re-rendering the normals here. And I want to see if there's a change, but there's still nothing fixed here. And this one's really boggling me because both sides are just sharing the same texture, and something really strange is going on there. I'm trying to see if it's a problem with me manually having to go in and fix things. So what I'm trying now is I'm trying to flip the green channel for just the right side of the spikes. I'm trying to flip the red channel now for just one side, and both are not the solution for the problem. Checking out my UVs. I'm trying to see what happens if I share the same part of the texture as the other side. And that's also not doing anything. So I'm just turning out that unwrap modifier to see the previous result. It got a little bit better, but still not everything. So I'm just thinking it's got to be something with the mesh. The mesh probably has a problem with its normals or something. I'll try and share this entire part. Try and bake it like this. So I've rotated the UVs, because I'm thinking it might be some problem with the baking. And I'm duplicating this new layer over here, and you see they're intersecting a little bit there. I'm gonna have to fix that. I just want to see if it makes a difference, and it really doesn't seem to do all that much. It's still not perfect. So I'm really showing you this because it's one of the most annoying parts that I've encountered when baking the normals. Put a lot of effort into this, and for the life of me couldn't figure it out for a long time. Yeah, so what I'm doing is here, since the left side is the problem, I'm trying to rebuild it and it looks okay like that. A little bit of an intersection problem in the center. Looks okay, but still not perfect. I mean, it's such a simple part. It should bake out nicely because I'm following all the rules of split smoothing groups and then UV splits. So having a look at my smoothing groups again, they seem to check out okay. I'm going to try and split the smoothing groups in a different way. See if that's a solution. I'm going to weld these together. Align this one. Then select the entire element and mirror it around. Because obviously the mirroring of the UVs was not a problem. Should be better. And obviously if you don't unhide your high poly, you'll get all missed rays, as I just showed here. Okay, so same trick, getting it into my Photoshop layer, saving it as a TGA, and really it's not improving anything at all. So I'm going to go really extreme and split these parts even more. Because at the moment here I'm totally boggled by why it's not working. Repeat the same process. And wow, I'm really not getting anywhere with all this effort I'm putting into it. Trying to see if matching the cage more closely makes a difference. Render it again. It's made a little bit of a difference, but weirdo errors are still persisting. You can just see I've split the smoothing groups there, but still it doesn't look like it's supposed to when following all the regular rules. So what I'm doing now is I just checked the scale, and it turns out this object was mirrored. It has a scale of -100 on the x-axis, so I applied a reset x-form modifier, which you can get to from the utility panel, the hammer over there. You hit reset x-form and then reset selected, and it resets the x-form for you. The projection modifier gets messed up a little bit by that, but this is apparently the magical fix that I needed. So if you don't know what X-form is the sort of transform layer on top of an object in Max that keeps track of how it is rotated, scaled, and positioned. If you wouldn't have X-form, you wouldn't be able to rotate and scale instances in different scales than they are towards their parent. So If your scale is negative, then that might affect your normals. That might also affect your normal map. So just in case you have freaky ass errors, just do an X-form reset. And it turns out that is also fixing my error with my headlight. Isn't that just perfect? Perhaps I should have thought of this sooner, because I've read about it. I never really encountered it before. But it's always best to reset X-form on your objects before you bake them. I've included my little my little search for the solution in here, just to show you what kind of trouble it can cause and how hard it can be to fix that. Also, that edge around is looking really bad. Might have to change that. Resetting X-form on some of my parts, and this one's also looking better after the X-form reset. What you have to watch out for with reset X-form, just a warning, it's also, that's one of the main reasons I don't do it all the time, is if you reset X-form, you cannot undo that action. It's impossible to undo a reset X-form. If you hit Control Z or hit undo, it's not going to do anything. And if you delete the reset X-form modifier, it adds a modifier, and you have to collapse that modifier. If you delete that modifier, it's going to change the orientation on your object. It's going to reset it back to default orientation. So all rotations will be 0, scaling will change. And also another thing is, if you reset X-form, it will lose all orientation on your object. So for example, my frame is still rotated at, I think, what was it, 3.5 degrees or something? If I would apply a reset X-form modifier to that, that would destroy that orientation. It will forget all about it. And another reason is, if you have objects attached to another object, and you reset X-form on the parent objects, all the attached objects will also have their X-forms changed around and shuffled, and crazy things will happen to it. So definitely something to use with care, even though it's really important. Okay, so now that we finally have that fixed, we can get to a little bit more baking. And I think we're going to do the fuel tank next. It's such a cool big part. I think it'll be nice to bake something like this. Calling it LP fuel tank. And time to unhide the high poly. A projection. Yeah, and one of the reasons for the naming of your high poly objects also is it might be hard to just pick them in viewport, so it's easier to use the selection list. You can hit pick and then hit the selection list at the top left, and then just pick the correct object from that list. I use that a lot, it's easy. So again, this is a cylinder, so I want to match my cage caps as close as possible to the low poly, because I don't want to get that zigzag wavy effect on the edges. And the reason for this is just simply because you're baking a higher number of segments to a lower number of segments, and then you get interpolation issues. And you can just minimize them as much as possible. So you see, this one's baking a lot slower already because there's more surface to cover. You can imagine if I would be baking all my normals all the time at once, I would just be sitting around for minutes. So open the fuel tank, and yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. Duplicate it. Save over the miscellaneous normals and apply the normal map. And one of the reasons to use layers here is if you want to see just your low poly, you have to hit one button to hide all your high poly objects. Way easier to work with. Look at that, that's looking really cool. Look at those nice beveled edges. And there's almost no none of that wavy effect on it. Also, I love how that little indented part looks like. Okay. So one thing that's still bothering me is those lines on that spring. And I'm going to try and fix those now. As you can see, this is what I was talking about. You get that wavy effect, and there's really no way to fix that here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fix it in 2D. And this is a perfect example why you should not model everything in high poly. I know some people they tend to go all overboard and model everything in high poly, but this is the perfect example of, if you model it in high poly, then it might not end up as crisp and defined as it would when you do it in 2D. See, because there's a simple problem, is it's trying to get your high poly information to a grid of pixels, and this grid of pixels might not fit perfectly with the position of the detail it's trying to bake. So for this example, for these lines, I would like those lines to be one exact pixel. And the problem is it's baking them to, I don't know, 60% of a pixel, which means that the normal map ends up way fainter and not as defined as I would like it to. So if I manually draw out a single line with the correct color, and if you're not familiar with normal maps, you need to think about channels. If I want this effect to be top to bottom, so I need to draw in I think it's a green channel I'm drawing in here. Yeah, green channel. I just need to draw these into the green channel, and you just pick the color that that matches the direction you want to paint in your normal map. You see, look at that. It's going from red to green for some reason. What the hell? You paint those colors and then just use those instead. This might be hard if you're not really if you're new to normal maps, because what you're doing is, in a sense, you're actually painting math, which might confuse people, but let me just show you the result then. So yeah, obviously I need to invert them. If I rotate them around, there we go. Also, I've blurred them. You might not have noticed, but I've blurred them just to get the effect a little bit fainter. Okay. Let me just save that and check that out. And there we go, look at that. That looks perfectly just how I want it. It's perfectly defined, it's nice, crisp, and sharp. That's how they're supposed to be, and that's the reason you shouldn't model everything in high poly. For this reason, I don't mind that I've done it in high poly, because it would have been hard to do it otherwise, but I just fixed it in 2D. So anyway, that's the end of this video. Screen's gone black already. I'll see you in the next one.